the 8-year-old who memorizes every train schedule in the city, the teenager who can tell you the Latin name of every dinosaur that ever lived, the adult who's built a career from knowing everything there is to know about medieval weaponry. We call these special interests, and for decades, psychology treated them as symptoms to manage. Recent neuroscience research suggests this view may be fundamentally mistaken, and the real story reveals something profound about how passion shapes the brain. Here's what most people think they know about special interests. They're obsessive behaviors that keep autistic people from engaging with the real world. The Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders has historically classified these intense fascinations under restricted and repetitive behaviors, language that frames them as deficits from the start. Clinical literature through the 1990s and early 2000s consistently described special interests as barriers to social connection, rigid thinking patterns that needed to be redirected toward more appropriate activities. Even well-meaning parents and educators often see these intense fascinations as problems to solve rather than strengths to nurture. This view feels intuitive because special interests can look overwhelming from the outside. When a child spends 4 hours straight arranging toy cars by model year, or when an adult can recite every statistic from their favorite sports team going back 30 years, it's easy to worry about balance, about missing out on other experiences. The therapeutic approaches that emerged from this framework, from applied behavior analysis protocols to social skills training, might often focused on limiting time spent on special interests or redirecting attention elsewhere. But this entire mental model rests on a fundamental misunderstanding of what's actually happening in the brain. We've been looking at the shadow on the wall instead of the mechanism casting it. When neuroscientists finally turned their attention to the neural basis of special interests, what they found wasn't pathology. It was a specialized kind of cognitive architecture, one that might teach us something important about expertise, motivation, and the nature of deep learning itself. To understand what's really happening, we need to start with Jennifer Foss-Feig's 2016 study published in Autism Research. Her team at Mount Sinai used functional MRI to scan the brains of children and adolescents with autism while they viewed images related to their personal special interests. Trains for the train enthusiast, dinosaurs for the paleontology expert. They compared these responses to how neurotypical participants reacted to images of their own preferred interests. What Foss-Feig found was remarkable. When autistic participants viewed their special interest images, they showed significantly stronger activation in brain regions associated with visual processing and reward compared to neurotypical participants viewing their own interests. This wasn't just casual engagement, it was the neural signature of deep, sustained focus. The brain regions involved include areas like the fusiform gyrus, which processes visual recognition and categorization. While this region is well known for face recognition, it also activates when you're examining something you've developed expertise in. Bird watchers show activation here when viewing birds. Car enthusiasts show it for automobiles. But in autism, this expertise signal appears amplified and more sustained. The mechanism works like this. The autistic brain appears to have a different relationship with what neuroscientist Uta Frith calls central coherence, the tendency to process information by focusing on overall meaning and context rather than details. The autistic brain tends to maintain what's called weak central coherence, meaning it naturally focuses on fine-grained details without being automatically pulled toward broader contexts. When this detail-focused processing meets a genuinely interesting topic, something extraordinary happens. It's like having a microscope that never loses focus. The brain can examine every facet, every connection, every subtle variation within that domain. The special interest becomes a kind of cognitive laboratory where the mind can exercise its natural strengths without the usual distractions. Subsequent work by researchers, including Coles and colleagues, published in 2018 in Neuropsychologia, revealed another crucial piece. Autistic brains show distinctive patterns of connectivity between regions involved in attention, memory, and reward when engaging with special interests. It's not just that these topics capture attention, they activate the brain's learning machinery more efficiently than almost anything else. The reward pathways show sustained activation during special interest engagement. This creates a steady neurochemical reward that can maintain focus and motivation for extended periods, unlike the brief spikes and drops we might see with other activities. This explains why special interests often lead to genuine expertise. when your brain's reward system is optimally tuned to a particular domain, when your attention can sustain focus without effort, when your memory systems are operating at peak efficiency. You're not just practicing, you're in an ideal learning state. Temple Grandin didn't become a world-renowned animal behaviorist despite her autism. She became one because her autistic brain was perfectly suited to sustain detailed observation of animal behavior. A 2019 study by Amius and colleagues in biological psychiatry found that autistic brains show different patterns of neural connectivity compared to neurotypical brains. Rather than representing a deficit, this appears to be a different kind of neural organization, potentially more specialized connections that create efficient pathways for processing information within domains of high interest. Think of it like comparing a dense city grid to a highway system. The grid has more total connections, but the highway can move traffic much faster along specific routes. The autistic brain may have developed specialized neural highways for processing information within domains of high interest, while maintaining different patterns of connections that support this focused processing style. But the story isn't quite that simple. The relationship between special interests and autism reveals some genuine complexities that we're still working to understand. There's the question of intensity versus interference. While special interests clearly provide cognitive and emotional benefits, they can sometimes become so consuming that they interfere with other activities. The challenge isn't the interest itself, it's finding ways to harness that intense focus while maintaining flexibility in other areas of life. Research by Julie Lowndes Taylor at Vanderbilt, published in 2009 in the Journal of Autism and Developmental Disorders, found that about 75% of autistic youth have at least one special interest, but the intensity varies dramatically. Some children can easily shift away from their interest when needed, while others experience genuine distress when interrupted. The difference appears to relate to executive functioning skills and the ability to predict and prepare for transitions. There's also the replication question. Much of the neuroscience research on special interests involves small sample sizes. Foss-Feig's landmark study included just 17 autistic participants. While the findings have been replicated in several labs, we need larger studies to understand how generalizable these patterns are across the autism spectrum. Gender adds another layer of complexity. A 2020 study by Harrop and colleagues in autism research suggests that special interests can vary by gender, though the patterns are more complex than often assumed, with considerable individual variation in the types of interests that develop. But here's what's interesting. The neural mechanisms appear similar regardless of the content. Whether someone's expertise is in Victorian poetry or steam engines, the brain shows the same patterns of enhanced focus and reward. The developmental trajectory also remains unclear. Some special interests persist for decades, becoming the foundation for careers and lifelong learning. Others fade or transform over time. Longitudinal studies are just beginning to track how these interests evolve from childhood through adulthood, and whether early intervention should focus on expanding interests or deepening existing ones. Perhaps most importantly, we don't fully understand the relationship between special interests and social difficulties. The traditional view held that intense interests pulled autistic people away from social connection. But research by Grove and colleagues in 2018, published in the Journal of Autism and Developmental Disorders, suggests the relationship might be more complex. Some studies indicate that special interests can actually facilitate social connections when shared with others who have similar interests, while the social challenges in autism may stem from entirely separate neural mechanisms. So what does this mean for how you think about intense interests, whether in yourself, your child, or someone you know? This fundamentally reframes what expertise looks like. We're used to thinking about expertise as something that develops through deliberate practice over many years. But the special interest research suggests there might be multiple pathways to deep knowledge. When someone's brain is naturally configured for sustained focus and detailed processing within a particular domain, expertise can develop much more rapidly and reach much greater depths than traditional models predict. If you're a parent or educator working with an autistic child, this research suggests that special interests aren't obstacles to overcome, but engines to harness. Rather than trying to limit time spent on the special interest, the more effective approach appears to be using that interest as a bridge to other learning. The child obsessed with trains can learn math through calculating speeds and distances, develop writing skills by creating train stories, explore history through the development of railways. For autistic adults, understanding the neuroscience of special interests can be profoundly validating. That deep dive into medieval history wasn't time wasted, it was your brain operating in its optimal learning mode. The intensity wasn't a character flaw, it was a cognitive strength that, properly channeled, can lead to genuine expertise and career success. But perhaps most importantly, this research challenges how we think about attention and focus more broadly. In a world increasingly concerned about shortened attention spans and distraction, the autistic brain's capacity for sustained, deep focus represents something valuable. It suggests that there might be neurological trade offs we don't fully appreciate, that the same brain architecture that struggles with rapid social processing might excel at the kind of sustained, detailed analysis that drives innovation and discovery. The key insight is recognizing when someone is operating in their zone of optimal functioning versus when they're struggling against their natural cognitive architecture. The goal isn't to make autistic brains work like neurotypical ones, it's to create environments where different types of brains can contribute their unique strengths. The 8-year-old memorizing train schedules isn't displaying pathological behavior. They're demonstrating what happens when a brain optimized for detailed processing encounters, a domain rich enough to sustain that focus. The teenager cataloging dinosaurs isn't avoiding the real world. They're engaging with it through a cognitive architecture that can achieve depths of understanding most of us will never experience. What we once saw as symptoms are actually windows into a different kind of expertise, one that emerges not despite neurological differences, but because of them. The question isn't how to redirect these interests, it's how to build a world that recognizes their value.